I'm doing my first Q&A today, and so I've got some questions that people have asked, and if you have questions that you would like answered, just leave them in the comments below. I am going to try to answer all questions. This is one of the reasons why I'm vlogging, is that I actually have more time in my life right now to just talk and give an off-the-cuff answer than I do to sit down and think through all the ramifications and write out a very systematic blog post like I used to do. If you're interested in just general mothering articles, I have like 300 to 500 articles that I've written on JessConnell.com. I'll link to that in the comments. So if you have a random question, that's probably a good place to go. If you want to know about breastfeeding or tantrums or getting a baby to sleep or how to deal with teaching your kids about sex, I have tons of articles that I've written over, I guess, 14 or 15 years that I've been writing online. You let me know if you like this format, and definitely leave your comments in the questions below. Here we go. Question number 1. Hi Jess, I've been enjoying your vlogs so much. You're the only YouTube mama who is actually encouraging to me and not unrealistic. Pause. I just want to say that's exactly what I'm going for. So it was really good to get this comment, because that is what I want to do. I'm not trying to sell you on living just like me. I'm not trying to present a picture so that I look really great or our family looks really great. I am a sinner. I am often, I'm messy as a mother. I'm often disorganized. I really get excited about certain things and then I don't do them for a while. Like I'll get into crocheting or knitting or pigs or whatever, hiking, backpacking with my family. So I'm not trying to be the backpacking mom or the homeschooling mom. I do a wide variety of things semi-well. I'm not trying to sell you to be just like me. What I am trying to do is provide a realistic picture and give some encouragement to moms out there who desire it. So this was really good to hear. I currently have 3 boys under the age of 5. That's really hard. It really took a toll on my body. All of them were C-sections. I loved the running vlog where you said that anyone who tells you that you can do it all is leaving parts out. That's how I feel. I want to do everything, including exercise consistently and eat super healthy. Instead, I constantly find those things taking a back seat to the demands of motherhood, and then I feel guilty because if it was important to me, I would make time for it. My biggest struggle is the way that my body has changed. I struggle with comparing myself to all the other ladies in my church who look perfect all the time and seem to have easily dropped baby weight. I know that comparison is never healthy, but it seems like it's always there in the back of my head nagging at me. I wouldn't say I'm severely overweight, but substantially more than I was before I had kids. I had diastasis recti with each pregnancy. I wondered if you'd ever struggled with this and if you had any encouragement for me or if you could address body image. I did address body image in one vlog. I'll link to that in the comments below. Here's what I would say. Body image is rough. We can see these things through multiple lenses. So one is just the practical elements of life. Practically, it is hard to gain weight. It's not good for us, but it happens naturally through pregnancy. Even in animals, we can see that a cow that loses too much weight often doesn't produce good milk. So we have natural biological processes that make it so that while we are in the phase of either being pregnant and breastfeeding or being capable of pregnant and breastfeeding, our body is preparing itself for that and working toward facilitating those processes. Not always. There are women who have metabolic issues, but in general, during the season of say 20 to 45, our bodies are leaning toward facilitating breastfeeding and baby making. I wrote an article about this. I'll link to it in the comments as well, like 13 reasons why I don't mind being a chunky, happy breastfeeding mom or something like that. Because I found that when I breastfed, I could lose weight during pregnancy, but very often I would lose 10 pounds the day I gave birth, and then I would immediately start to gain weight again. It was literally like my body couldn't stand to be thin. That's a hard thing to feel, and it feels like golly, if I could just lose enough weight, then everything would be okay. For me, I also found that when I exercised, my milk flavor apparently changed because the baby would start rejecting the milk and start having breastfeeding issues. So I kind of learned pretty early on to just kind of embrace the size that I was and do the best that I could. Just remember to go easy on yourself, at least somewhat. I'm not saying that we should all be morbidly obese and whatever because we're just breastfeeding and pregnant, but I'm saying that there is a natural process that does lend itself toward having a little extra, let's say, during a time when your body's trying to make milk and make sure that you have enough for this extra person that you're feeding or growing. We are not just physical beings, but we are spiritual beings, and we were given our bodies as an image bearer of God Himself. Jesus has a body. We are physical, we are not only spiritual beings, and so there are things that our bodies can teach us. One would be self-discipline, right? That if we're out of control, we need to grow in self-discipline. But another thing that our bodies teach us is just that we are affected by the fall. We are not perfect, we will never be perfect, and there will always be disappointments and discouragements that come with being a human in a fallen world. And so part of the way that we can counsel our own hearts is just, Lord, I am discouraged about my body. Help me to see my body the way that you've made it to be. Help me to be a good steward of my body, but also not to put my hope in my body. My body is not the final story. Christ's redemption of my body, that I will have an eternal body that is not affected by sin. Not that, and in that body, I will not be able to physically have children anymore. So there are things that this body can do and was made to do that are both eternally potentially fruitful, and that we can actually be part of God's creation of human beings, but also there are things that are just limited by the fallenness of this world. So we don't have our hope in our bodies, but we can take joy in what God has made them for and try to do the best job we can being a steward of this physical resource that He's given us. And even when we fall down and don't do a good job and we eat another bowl of popcorn or whatever, our hope is not in our performance. Our hope is in Christ and His perfect performance. And we can go on having hope even when we screw up. And we can go on having hope on a day that we do perfect, not in ourselves, but in the one who has done perfectly, no matter which way we perform. So those are my thoughts about how we should be counseling our thinking as we go about living in these physical, disappointing bodies. Yeah. Okay, so I constantly want to do all the things, and I totally agree. It's very hard to live within the limitations of motherhood, and especially when there's so many Insta mommies who are like doing exercise challenges or whole foods, this and that, and trying to get down to really low weights. And it feels like, man, if I could just get myself together, I could do that. And you know what? I think to a degree that's actually true. Like if I cleared everything else out of my life, I know for certain that right now, if I ate a particular way, that I've learned that my body can lose weight really fast if I do this. If I did that kind of eating and also intermittent fasting, and if I did nothing with the kids or my projects like vlogging or my writing projects, if I cleared everything out mentally and physically from my schedule and I just focused on running and doing intermittent fasting, and keto is how my body tends to really quickly drop weight, then I could get down really low. Probably within a month or so, I could be at a dramatically different weight. So there is an element to which if I could just get my act together, I could be a lot thinner. And if I was significantly obese, I would need to do that. And actually this last month, I've been focused on trying to run when I can, trying to get in more steps when I can, and trying to eat healthier when I have a decision to make about that. So that actually leads into the next thing I would say, which is living in reality. It's what my vlog was about when I dealt with body issues, but I feel like every one of us has a reality. Some people have a mother-in-law that lives with them and can easily watch the kids. Some people have, maybe their business relies on them being a personal trainer or something. And so they have an inbuilt system and motivation to deal with those things that's different from what perhaps you or I have. But we have to live within the realm of our actual reality. Some people can afford really great organic foods or specialty foods. Maybe their husband makes good money and they can do that. I don't have those freedoms. So we all have to live within the reality of who we are, the resources that we have, the things that we can and can't do. We have to do that with the time that we have. Each of us have kids with different restrictions and demands. A breastfeeding infant that is struggling to grow takes way more energy than one that is just fat and happy and sleeps really well and kind of weaves its way into your life really easily. Those two realities both contain an infant, but the reality of those two situations is very, very different. And so, yeah, pull back from the comparisons, pull back from looking at anybody else's life. Now, that doesn't mean we can't learn from other people's lives, but we can't do a one-to-one. One way that I learned this that I hope will help you is I have 9 children. We used to go to a church where there were 3 different families that had 12 children. But what I realized really early on is all 3 of those families had multiple adult daughters. They had a lot of girls on the front end of their child rearing, and that made for a totally different family dynamic than exists in our family. We have a lot of boys. They don't notice if the baby is crying. I mean, maybe they notice, but it's like a back of the head thing, whereas my daughter is like, oh, what's wrong, baby? I'm not trying to overgeneralize about boys or girls, but girls generally are bent toward motherly type instincts, and boys generally are built towards task-specific leanings. And so the inclinations that exist in a family that has a bunch of girls at the beginning versus a bunch of boys at the beginning is just 2 different families. And so I realized very quickly that while I could glean some things from these big families, there was not ever going to be a one-to-one exact, like I need to do everything the way that they did, because we have different family dynamics. I think it's really similar here. I think we have to live in reality of who we are and what choices we do have. One thing that I learned on our backpacking trip, if you are interested in learning about that, I'll link to that video in the comments as well. We did a 12-day backpacking trip as a family. That was 4 years ago, and we went around Mount Rainier. But one thing that still is a lesson that got drilled into my head during those 12 days is that God actually really made our bodies to intake food so that we could use them for energy, and it goes through us like that. The American diet and the way we've all been raised to do is to clear our plates, to eat 3 meals a day. Maybe you also have a built-in snack time, or maybe your family had a regular dessert every other night, or there's things that we have built into our culture that maybe aren't actually in line with that. What am I intaking? Is it fueling what I'm doing? And then I'm using it up. I'm not saying I'm doing this perfectly, but when I notice that I'm starting to accrue weight, like I did during COVID, rather than using up what I have, then what I try to do is pay really careful attention to my appetite. So not just an internal urge like, oh, popcorn would really be good right now. That's my downfall, is buttered popcorn. It's my biggest downfall. I'll just go nuts on a bowl of popcorn. But to not just think, oh, well, it sounds good to me, but actually, like, does my body need food right now? And if not, then I do skip breakfast, or I will skip meals, or I'll just eat, like, for example, if the family is having tacos, I will skip the tortilla or the corn chips part of that, and I'll just focus on meat, maybe some beans. I'll put in a little bit of rice, but I don't need lots of carbs. What I need is protein and calories that don't add bulk to my figure. And so right now, that's what I'm focusing on is, am I actually hungry? And if so, am I making those minute decisions? Whoa! Am I making minute decisions that lead to my own health and ability to use up what I'm intaking? So I don't know if those ideas will be helpful for you. I would also say, do feel free to experiment to learn how your body actually interacts with food. So like I said, for me, my husband and I did a keto cleanse several years ago, and I realized that actually that's a really enjoyable way for me to eat in a way that I can lose weight really quickly. So like right now I'm not doing keto. Like I said, I'll add in rice sometimes, but when I have the option, I limit my carb intake because I know that's a way that my body will respond well to losing weight. So those are some examples. I hope this is helpful. I'm certainly no dietary guru. It is something that I think about and I want to keep growing in, and I've certainly had it on my mind the last couple of years as I've turned 40. I do want to have a body that's usable for the long term. I do see also that physical exertion and being able to use your physical body seems to have a dramatic impact on your mental clarity late in life. So for me, using my body is super important to me for the long term, and I want to be a person that keeps growing in my health and flexibility and just general ability to use my body for the long haul. All right, question number 2. What does the new job look like for your husband and for your family? My husband is a camp manager for a facility that hosts up to about 300. All summer long, we host preteen and teen camps. From September to May, it's retreat season. And so there are school events and music events and school groups and discipleship groups, ladies retreats, all sorts of events like that we host. It's a really nice facility because it's just 30 minutes outside of Dallas, but it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. He is over the staff, and then in the retreat season, he serves more as he's serving meals, he's facilitating the group activities, like making sure that there's enough ropes trained workers that come out to support the groups as they do their ropes stuff, or lifeguards if they're going to swim, that kind of thing. He's in charge of all the contracts and tours, so that's kind of what he does. I keep the pool area. My older sons are full-time summer staffers this summer. My daughter is a day camp staffer, so she works with those 5 to 11-year-olds when they come for a day type camp experience. Our middle kids help serve meals when they can, or help with cleanup. So it is kind of a whole family experience, and it's really great. So that's kind of what it looks like. I hope that answered your question. How have you helped your kids through this transition to a new place? We moved recently. One of our kids are having a harder time than the others. So I've actually written an article about this. I will link to that in the comments about, I think, 21 ways to help your families through transition. We've done a lot of transition. We've moved around the world. We've moved, I think, to 14 different homes in our 20 years of marriage. Not all of those were to new cities or communities, but some of them were. And it's definitely harder the older your kids get. Okay, so with younger kids, I think the biggest thing is keep their sleeping and eating schedules the same. For me, that's what I found is this getting into a new normal super fast, finding a park that we love, or getting into even a homeschool co-op. I'm not a big homeschool co-op person, but when we moved to a new community, I found it helpful to do a semester so that we could make some friends, get into a new routine, have a good time. So things like that. Find a new routine that's good for your little kids. For bigger kids, I would say the biggest thing that we've done is talking. We talk really openly with our kids. We talk through the why of the transition. We talk through the emotions of it. We talk through the difficulties. We ask questions. How are you doing? What's been the hardest thing about this for you? What are you really missing? And often there's tears that come. Is there any way we can help you? Sometimes just offering for a phone conversation with an old friend that they miss, or helping them to know that they can write letters to an old friend. But then for our older kids, like just helping them get plugged in, and that's not always easy. And one of the things that I have found, especially with my older kids, is an increasing need for me to entrust them to God's care. What I mean by that is not that I don't still talk things through with them, not that I don't still mourn with my children who are mourning. There are things that bring grief when we leave things good, behind, and we move towards different things. But there's also a sense in which we cannot protect our kids from sorrows, and the things that they are learning right now at age 13 or 17 or 10 are things that God is going to keep drawing on for the rest of their lives, and He will be the one to carry them through transitions. And we don't see, but He does see what they're going to face when they're 32, or when their husband loses his job when she's 46 and thought everything was settled, and now he's been an accountant and everything was great, and all of a sudden they don't have a job. But God knows those things, and He will be preparing them through the sorrows they have right now in this life to walk through whatever He has planned for them in their lives. I say all that to say, mourn with the things that are mournful. You don't have to deny anything. Talk about what's hard. Sit with them in their sadness. Help them find new ways to have joy. But also, like, for your own heart, remember to trust the Lord with the hard things, and not just think this all just sucks and no good can come from it and they're just so sad or whatever. God can bring good from it. Any thoughts on COVID-19? Yes, and I recorded a video about that when I was on a walk yesterday, so I'm gonna play that now. Some of you have asked me to share my thoughts about COVID. It seems to me that COVID brings real risks to our country, that the virus, I do not believe that the virus is a hoax. The virus is real, and it seems to present similar to hypoxia, which is what happens to people's lungs when they go up on Mount Everest without a ventilator. It's a really odd virus. This virus seems to present differently than many that we've ever had. And so normally in a naturally occurring virus, you have multiple stages, one of which is animal to animal, but then there's usually a pause where the virus has to obtain certain data in order to, and try itself out on various hosts in order to gain the experience needed to jump from animals to humans. And that step seemed to have been skipped, which makes it all the more likely that it came out of the lab. Again, I'm repeating what I've heard. I am not an expert in this, but I don't believe that it's a hoax. I do believe that there's fishy things happening with this virus. And as far as how we're treating it as a family, my kids and I and my husband, we obey the law. So, and we obey the rules of whatever store we're in. So like, we've worn masks in Costco because they require it, not many other places. And so we're obeying the law, but we're also not living in fear. While we're being cautious in terms of proximity for the sake of others, we are not limiting ourselves to masks. That's kind of where we fall on this, that we're going to obey the law and we're going to try to petition our local politicians. And I'm very, very thankful to live in a freedom-loving state. I'm super thankful that we moved from Washington to Texas. And that's kind of my thoughts on COVID. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I listen to them sometimes and I pay attention to what's happening and I weigh it according to my best judgment and what I can tell is going on in the nation. So that's kind of where I am with that. I think we are to be wise as human beings. Christians are not to be naive or stupid or put ourselves in danger's way for no reason. We don't have to walk into conspiracy theory territory and just believe the worst about everything. My approach is intake heaps of information and then run it through my filter of what seems rational and reasonable, and am I taking into account all the factors? So I'm watching China, I'm watching President Trump and the decisions that he's making. I'm watching key leaders that are perhaps on a security committee or whatever. And then running things through that and going, okay, so like to me, the Wuhan lab theory seems entirely possible and more than possible. I think even likely at this point that it came out of a lab and that they were doing some sort of research and that it may or may not have been altered by humans. I do think that evidence at this point that I have seen points to non-intentional transmission, kind of like it got out and the Communist Party just like tried to cover it foolishly. Bad decision making, short-sighted. But at this point, I don't believe that the Chinese government did it purposefully. So that's where I fall right now. I don't know if that helps you. I don't even know if that's what the person was asking, but those are my thoughts on the COVID crisis. Okay, my final question is a personal one. She says, did you publish your story about Jacob's wives? No, I didn't. I sent it out to my beta readers, which was over 100 people. I got amazing feedback. I'd really like to publish it, and I just haven't, and there's no good reason I ought to do it. I love storytelling. I have been, this last year, a part of a writers group here in our local town, and I have started taking chapters to that. But then COVID hit, and so I haven't kept that up. I need to do that. I'm putting myself on the record right now that at the next physical meeting, I'm going to go ahead and print out the second chapter and take that for feedback. So that's it. I hope this answers your questions. I hope this wasn't too long. And if you have more questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will answer that in Q&A number 2. Thanks. Bye-bye.